Ever wondered if the traditions we hold so dear have roots in unexpected places? What if I told you that the gown you wore at graduation has an Islamic origin? Or that one of the greatest Christian thinkers built his ideas on knowledge passed down by Muslim philosophers? Today we're diving deep into 5 surprising ways Islam has shaped Western culture. And trust me, you won't believe how closely connected they are. Wait till you hear about number 3. It'll leave you questioning everything. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss more amazing facts that'll make you the most interesting person in the room. Let's get right into it. Today we're here with Dr. John Esposito, a man whose journey is as fascinating as the facts he's about to share with us. Imagine this. A Catholic man who spent years in a monastery goes on to become America's leading expert on Islam. Intrigued? You should be. Now let's start with something familiar, your graduation gown. Did you know that the cap and gown tradition didn't start in the West? It actually traces back to 9th century Muslim universities. The long gown represented the Quran's knowledge, and that tassel you moved from side to side? It was originally a bookmark used in the Quran. Pretty mind-blowing, right?
Roots itself in Muslim universities in the 9th century, where Europe's best and brightest would go to these universities, and they would want to come back home and mimic the thobe and the flat cap symbolized the Quran as the highest form of knowledge. And even the tassel would have been the bookmark in the Quran, for keeping your place in the Quran. I mean, the fact that the Islamic intellectual tradition really influenced something as common.
And speaking of universities, where do you think the idea of modern universities came from? Structured classes, dorms, degrees, all that? You guessed it, Islamic institutions were doing it long before Europe even thought of it. The academic system we have today owes a lot to these early centers of learning.
The model for universities in many ways were the early universities in Islam. The notion of having hostels for students. As one prominent scholar of Islam said, during the Dark Ages, if you were up on another planet and you looked down, the West was invisible. It would have been the Islamic world that stood out.
Now here's where things get really interesting. You've probably heard of Thomas Aquinas, one of the biggest names in Christian theology. But what if I told you his revolutionary ideas were shaped by Muslim philosophers?
I studied Catholic theology in many venues. Very few people ever talk about the fact that Thomas Aquinas, who used to be seen as the great Catholic theologian, and his teacher were influenced by what came the philosophical tradition that then was passed on back into the West.
Yep, some of his greatest works were influenced by scholars from the Islamic world. One of the biggest figures in Christianity, building on Islamic knowledge. Who would have thought? And we're not stopping there. During Europe's Dark Ages, while the West struggled, the Islamic world was thriving in fields like algebra, medicine, and astronomy.
The same thing happens when you look at areas of medicine and science and technology. And a lot of that is just beginning, I think, at a popular level to surface right now.
In fact, we're still using their breakthroughs today, and they've shaped the world more than we realize. Ever use words like algebra, algorithm, or alcohol? You've been using Arabic without even knowing it.
During that period, you had a fluorescence in terms of the areas of philosophy, medicine, algebra, etc. And then that was carried over into the West.
These words and many more were brought into Western languages thanks to the influence of Islamic scholars. They didn't just give us scientific ideas, they enriched our language, our stories, and even the way we think.
One of your colleagues at Georgetown actually told me once that even Thomas Jefferson was influenced by John Locke, who was influenced by the Muslim philosopher Ibn Tufayl.
So why don't we learn about this in school? That's where Dr. Esposito comes in. He's dedicated his career to bringing these hidden connections to light, reminding us that our cultures are much more intertwined than we're often taught. Next time someone says Islam and Western culture are worlds apart, you'll have the facts to prove them wrong.
In the U.S., for example, it was typical in universities you did not have, unless they were a religious university, a religion department. Now you have them in different areas, but how do you get it into the schools, the high schools, etc.? And now we have a program, and if you go to our website, we have a woman who does these courses for high school teachers, and we fund it, etc., and for other teachers so that they can go back into the classroom. So that now, when I have students coming in, unlike 1993, 95, 96, when I first went to Georgetown, many of my students have come across Islam and Islamic history in their courses.
Thanks to Dr. Esposito's work, we now see how deeply connected our histories really are, intertwined in ways that might surprise you.
In general, the approach to talking about Muslims in America was always in terms of when did Muslims come from overseas to America, and also Arab Christian, etc. In recent years, with the rise of the Nation of Islam, with Muhammad Ali in terms of an example, that there was more of a sense, and we still forget it, when people talk about Muslims in America and their issues, they forget that almost 1/3 of the population in America are African American or Black.
So, if you've ever felt like the world is more divided than united, remember, knowledge is the key to understanding. And understanding our shared history is the first step towards building bridges. Keep learning, keep questioning, and who knows, you might just change someone's perspective with what you've learned today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and always keep an open mind. Subhanallah.